Welcome back to IGN at Gamescom now. I'm Joe Screbbles and I'm joined by Matt and Sam from the FIFA team, and we are going to talk some football, which is always the highlight of my European travels. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And Matt, I'd love to start with you because you are in charge of the story, the narrative for probably the biggest change in FIFA this year, Volta, which, I mean, it's still, you know, we're getting to grips with it. We saw a bit more yesterday, but it still feels like a bit of a mystery.
Yeah.
I'd love you to elaborate on what Volta's about, and particularly that story element. I'd love to know what we're gonna play.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I mean, Volta Football, I mean, holistically is really about celebrating what the world's game is from a different perspective that the fans have been asking for a long time, right? And we've been kind of honing and polishing and getting into a deep 11-a-side experience for a long time. I'm really good at that, but we also understand that for a lot of people out there, their actual stadiums are streets, you know, their cages, their courts, and that's where they can really express their creativity and their style. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, you know, they even influence the way the professional game is played, and that's what Volta Football really is. It's about celebrating that creativity and all of that style and kind of passion. And Volta Story is a narrative experience that brings you through that world, and you're confronted with some colorful characters, some real legends of street you'll meet and get to test your mettle against them. You also get to build your squad up and ready yourself for kind of the biggest tournament in the Volta world, which is the World Championships in Buenos Aires. Mm-hmm. And you're going to want to try and get the right players, the right mix of players to try and take a run at that. And along the way, you're gonna make some friends probably, and some enemies too. But really, it's just a fun, lighthearted story about kind of diving into that deep and colorful world of street football.
And are we talking about a branching narrative like The Journey as well, or is it a bit more of a straightforward experience through it?
It's a more straightforward experience in some respects, but in other respects, it's got more user agency in that, unlike the Journey, which we had, curated characters, mm-hmm. you have your avatar now, and that was really important for us, that we wanted to satisfy what fans have been asking for a while, which is the ability to make themselves in the game and bring themselves into that space and experience that narrative in that world. And so now we're all about giving you the opportunity to customize yourself, choose how you look, what you wear in game, how you dance when you score a goal, and how you move on the court, and really able to create your kind of personal brand inside the Volta Football world, and that was really important for us as well.
You worked on The Journey as well.
I did, yeah.
And obviously that was a huge change for FIFA to introduce a story mode, to introduce narrative, and now that this is the fourth year we're having a story in FIFA.
Yeah.
What have you learned? What is it about creating stories within this sports structure that kind of works for you? What do you think is making it continue to work?
Yeah, going back to The Journey, that was always a trilogy, and we were always aiming to make it kind of this kind of nice, clean arc, and we wrapped it up nicely in 19. We were pretty happy with the results there, and we also heard that the fans were hungry for that same kind of experience. But the sports world is just so full of drama and interesting stories in and of itself, right? It's a factory for that kind of stuff. So it's not hard to draw those kinds of moments out and get them to happen to you in that context. Mm-hmm. And so when you insert interesting character into that, that's when you get the fun stuff. And I think that was where we kind of tested the waters a bit in The Journey and figured out what our voice was and how we could, create a fun world to explore. Yeah. And then in Volta Football, we were able to take that even further, because it's our world and we had to do what we wanted with it, and that was really fun.
So you're inventing a bit more around that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And do you have a similar sort of multi-year plan for this like you did with The Journey?
Well, right now we're just focused on 20, mm-hmm. And so we're trying to get that out the door right now and doing the last tweaks here and there. But we're really hoping that the fans respond to Volta Football Story like they did The Journey.
Cool. Yeah. And in terms of, like you mentioned that you've refined the 11-11 system. Obviously, you're paring it down for smaller games now, multiple different types of smaller games.
Yes.
What kind of challenges did that present with, using those existing mechanics, but having to rely on smaller and smaller pools of players?
It was really interesting. I mean, conceptually, from the very beginning, it was really important for us. When we were doing our research, we discovered that one of the core pillars of small-sided football and street football is that it is so diverse. Wherever you go, every country, every city has its own version, flavor of the game, and it was critical for us to capture that diversity and that difference across all the ways you can play the game. So that's why we set about creating 3v3 rush with no keeper, 4v4, 4v4 rush, 5v5 futsal. And when you introduce something as simple as walls, like you see here, in a smaller space, even though we're using the same fundamental gameplay that FIFA has been known for so long, it changes the dynamics so much, right?
Yeah,
there's no out of bounds. It creates, a kind of more fast-paced, frenetic feel. You got to move the ball really quickly, and it also creates a space where skill moves are something that you really want to get good at. And something that we thought was really critical to achieving that was simplifying them, just to make the experience a bit more accessible for users that might be coming in, players that might be coming in to play our game that maybe aren't even football fans. They just want to try something out that's new.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what Volta does for us in that respect is it kind of reduces football to its elemental levels, right? It takes away some of the rules that, for an outsider, can be a bit confusing, right? And it's just down to kick the ball into the net, right? And use your teammates to do that. And this, what you're seeing here, this 3v3, the wall becomes like a fourth teammate almost, right? You can play it off the wall to yourself, to your teammate, and all these things that we try to kind of bring together with the gameplay team, which they did an unbelievable job to make it this experience that feels really fresh and different, and it's unique in and of itself. But at the same time, you do know that you're playing FIFA, and you do know that when I go to the 11v11 game, what I'm learning here inside these courts, these cages, is going to translate. And that was also super important, that people could graduate, if you will, from Volta into that if they wanted to.
Oh, that's cool.
Or if they were just happy playing the smaller sided football, they gave them that depth that they can stay in there and play it in different ways. That's why I wanted to create so many different ways to play the game, not only in the match types and the squad sizes, but also, so we've got the Volta Story, obviously, which is exciting for us. We have Volta World, where you can just travel across the 17 locations across the world and play tournaments in the different various forms. And then for that little competitive edge, we introduced Volta League, which is that kind of online competitive vibe as well. So we wanted to give you all those different ways to kind of dive into it. And a really fun part about it as well is that all the teams that you're playing against the AI are composed and built by the community.
Right. Okay,
so all that stuff we were talking about, customization, personalization, about having your own identity in that world, you're going to see it, all these people's different takes on what their Volta players are, and have the ability to have them on your team. Because after you beat somebody,
you pick them up.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I mean, you're talking about Volta like it's an entire separate game in some senses, like you could just concentrate on that.
Yeah.
What made you include it as part of FIFA rather than make a FIFA Volta game?
Yeah, that's a good question. For us, it was always about the FIFA as a whole experience, and like we said, that a player can come into here and basically learn football, and then when they're in this space, they can go, hey, I like this. What else is there? And then FIFA 11 aside is right there. And so for us, is about how these things can work together and complement each other and not be two totally separate entities, and that they can actually work together as one unit and help people understand and love the game that so many of us love so much already.
That's really cool. And in terms of that, just to return briefly to the narrative mode, can you talk about what that story is at all? Like, with your created character, can you talk about where you'll go with it?
Are you asking me to spoil the story on a live stream?
Not spoil the story, just the start, just the inciting incident.
Well, so the ultimate goal, like I alluded to before, I'm going to be sneaky.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. Is to get to the Volta World Championships and take a crack at that, right?
Right.
So
Gotcha.
to build your squad along the way, and it's about understanding what makes Volta tick.
Right. Gotcha.
If that's
okay.
vague and
I feel like that's all
enough.
you're going to tell me.
Yeah. But the cool part is, like I said, you'll get to meet some real life street legends, as well as some real life football stars you might recognize. So.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And to bring Sam in a bit, because I feel like you've just had to watch a lot of Volta for a long time. I'd love to talk a bit about, we've talked about how the game's been refined for Volta, but obviously you're always working on the 11-11 game.
Yes,
like,
for sure.
What are your big goals this year with the gameplay in FIFA?
Yes, so the first thing I actually want to mention is that this year we worked very close with the community. The community feedback was very important, and most of those big features that we are bringing to FIFA 20 are based on feedback on what the community wanted to see. So this year we focus on the three main areas of football, which is on the ball, off the ball, and the ball itself. And I want to start telling you a little bit about off the ball, which is a re-architected positioning system that we have in FIFA 20 that allows us to give more time and space to the dribbler, so there can be more one-on-ones. So one-on-ones, that's what we're basically trying to encourage. Why? Because, well, first of all, they are a very interesting part of football when you see Mbappe trying to beat Jordi Alba, for example. And then in FIFA, it's gonna be the time where user skill is gonna matter. That's where my skill is gonna shine. So we wanted to encourage those moments. So that's very important. And then when you are in those moments, we needed to give you some more tools, which is when you're on the ball. And those tools are the strafe dribbling, which is just a tool that allows you to be super agile and responsive with the ball to try to avoid getting tackled. Then there's the control tackling system, which is a new system that basically calculates how the player should get to the ball to tackle it and recover possession. Then there is the composed finishing, which is different improvements to the fundamentals of shooting to give you a more consistent and clinical experience. So what I mean is, if you're in an easy situation in a one-on-one with the goalkeeper, then you should be able to score most of the times. If you are in a more complicated situation, you're outside of the box and then the ball is bouncing, there's a lot of defenders in front of you, then you should have less chances to score. So that's important. And then the setup touch, which is actually a really cool mechanic where you can just basically push the ball in front of you and the right speed, the right angle, so you can approach it with a good angle as well, so you can get a better shot with less error, more chances to score. So
that feels like it's been built on the sort of first touch, like flicks and those movements that you introduced last year.
Exactly. And then when it happens, and then feels like you work for that, for setting up the ball when there's enough time and space, and then you work for it, and then if you score, it's very rewarding. And then we have brand new penalty kicks and free kicks. The intention is to have accessible systems that are pretty accessible, so everybody can understand. And the aiming is very simple, but then there's more depth. If you really want to master those systems, you need to practice. For example, in free kicks, you need to swing the right stick, and then based on how you swing it, you apply spin to the shot, so it can go around or over the wall, for example. And finally, for the ball itself, we have a brand new ball physics system. And that means that the ball is just going to bounce in a more natural way. If the ball hits me, it's going to get deflected like it would in real life. And if I take a shot, then if it's a finesse shot, I will see more curve, for example. If it's a lace shot, I may get a rising shot or a dipping shot based on how I hit the ball. So basically more pronounced trajectories. So when you put all these things together, the game just feels more like real football. You feel like you are actually playing the actual.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And in terms of, you were talking about the community feedback and how much that's become a part of the development. This slightly silly off-topic one, but indoor football has been something that people have talked about since FIFA 98, and it's now popped back up here. Is that a direct result of people asking for it literally every single year?
I can tell you that I've been at Gamescom for a few years, and always the most requested feature was like street playing on the streets, for sure, for many years. And actually we're very happy that now FIFA 20 is finally back, and yeah, it's a big year for us.
It does feel like you've got a bit more of that sort of slightly earlier FIFA, like just a touch of silliness to it. It's like, it's not just pure simulation. You've got the house rules, you've got Volta, you've got this sense of like you're bringing some of the more fun like playground elements of football to FIFA now. Is that like a conscious evolution? You kind of started last year and it seems like that's expanding this year as well.
For us, it's very important to have variety in game modes. So for example, with Volta, that's a big part. We had the journey before. Now we have house rules as well. We have FUT. There's a lot of different things going on there. Obviously, variety in terms of licenses as well. For example, this year we're expanding with the Bundesliga, and now we're here in Germany. There's 13 new stadiums. There's around 180 new player faces in the game. So that's very important. And also expanding in terms of gameplay, bringing innovation every year. So I think those three things together is what we focus on.
That was a nice goal.
Yeah.
And talk to me more about that adding the Bundesliga. I'd love to know what goes into, how do you choose those new licenses? How do you go about getting those faces? What's the process of like the behind the scenes stuff? Because I love the idea that you're having to get in touch with these players, like work with them so deeply. Like what is that for you guys? Yeah,
well, obviously our goal in the long term is to have as many teams as possible, right? So there is a team that they work on the licenses and what players are going to have. And then when that's done, then we go, like basically we go to the certain places where the players are, we scan them, we bring all those scans back to Vancouver. We've sent people so they can take very sophisticated photos of the stadiums. We send them back, and then we have the artists back in Vancouver, like actually making those stadiums in FIFA. So it's actually it's a long process. But it's totally worth, because it's not simple to add a stadium into FIFA, right? And every year we add many more. So it's something that we're actually very proud of, which is all the variety that we have.
Well, speaking of variety, I'd love to talk about FUT and some of the additions there. I know we talked about, you've talked previously about the added kind of customization elements, like being able to unlock sort of outlandish tifos and like quite strange new parts of that, like we were talking about with the slight more increase in silliness, a bit more fun. Like, can you talk us through how that came about and what we'll see in those customization elements?
I think it's the same idea that you should be able, if you want to get maybe a little bit far from the authenticity, if that's what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind it was, again, to have variety, to have more things for you. And yeah, after a lot of brainstorming, and actually a lot of that had to do with the feedback as well from game changers, from pro players, they wanted to see something fresh. And then our friends back in Vancouver that work in the FUT team, they were brainstorming for a long time until they say, okay, they came up with those features that allow you to have more personalization. That's what they were trying to achieve with those new, I don't know how you call them, what you mentioned.
The extra elements,
the
tifos and stuff.
the tifos, yeah.
And that's across the whole thing. I mean, it goes all the way to Volta as well.
Oh, does it?
Well, just personalization in general.
Yes.
The theme of people being able to have their own experience that they customize for themselves. And that's something that we want to have consistent across the whole game. So it's, like you said, from FUT to the gameplay to Volta to all of it, we wanted to have that ability to customize and tailor your own experience to the way you want to play it.
Cool. And to swap to another new mode, or another mode, I should say. Career modes had a big change this year as well. So could you talk us through those changes as well?
Do you want to?
You're probably better for that one, yeah.
Okay. So I know there's a lot of more customization in terms of managers, for example. That's very important. You can also have a woman manager, which is important. And then I know that there's a new morale system. So players basically, they understand better what's happening. They react to the decisions of the manager. And I know that was something that the community really wanted. They were asking for it for years. So it's finally here. And I would love to tell you more, but I'm more into the gameplay side. We have our career mode friend somewhere in the back.
That's where he's actually scoring goals right now.
Well, I mean, that does interest me, that interplay with the gameplay then. I mean, I'd love to talk about, if we're talking about morale boosts, if we're talking about how that affects players, can we talk about how players can vary from game to game, how they'll react to those different morale boosts? Like, what will that affect in a sort of scientific way on the back end?
This is actually an interesting question. So in gameplay, how we develop the players is just related to stats. It's just the stats. So sometimes people tell us, why when I play FIFA Ultimate Team, the game feels different? It's just the same players, but with added stats like chemistry, for example. So it would be the same thing here, depending on how the player is doing, like the ratings that they get based on career mode or whatever game mode calculates them. Then they just go into gameplay, and then you see that really makes the player maybe a little bit slower when dribbling, if the dribbling attribute is lower in that case. So it's just modification of attributes, and then there's some external system deciding, okay, are we going to increase those attributes, like in FUT when there's good chemistry, or are we going to decrease maybe those attributes, let's say if my manager is not happy with me, for example.
Right.
So that's kind of how we develop those systems.
That's cool. And in terms of Volta, how does that, I mean, obviously we're working with a bit more emphasis on skill moves and a bit more emphasis on flair play.
Yeah.
Is that something that you are actively changing in the back end, or is that something that you're just you find yourself doing more because you've got more space on the pitch?
Well, we didn't change it on the back end. We changed the controls a little bit. We simplified it a little bit.
Right, okay.
Just so that people can get to it a little easier. Obviously, the way you can do it in 11-a-side is still there, so if that's what you're used to, that's how you like playing, that's totally option for you. but we want to, again, lower that barrier a little bit, so you can actually do skill moves by holding both triggers and just going in a direction, and it'll contextually play a skill move in that situation. Likewise, you can do a simplified flick where you just click the right stick and you'll do a flick again contextually with what's around you. It just kind of gives players a quicker taste of what that looks like, because that world is full of that, right? As part of it is like scoring with style, not just scoring. And then we also added some new flare animations to kind of top that off and round out that experience. And again, that was all about just capturing that vibe and make sure that it felt like a real small-sided or street game.
Awesome, that's great. Well, that's about all the time we have with you guys, I should say. That was a lot of FIFA. I was really got my words. But we have got so much more coming from Gamescom, so keep it locked to IGN.